Hello everyone, I'm Amy with Eating Healthy, Spending Less, and today I am so excited to share with you the easiest sourdough bread recipe you have ever seen. It makes delicious sandwich bread. Stay tuned. So many of you have made my sourdough starter recipe along with the sourdough bread recipe that I have posted on my website and here on YouTube. It makes delicious sourdough bread. I think we would all agree to that. It's big, it's fluffy, it's amazing. There are some days though where I don't have the time to make that sourdough bread. It has 4 stretch and folds in it. It can take up a bit of my afternoon. And so I wanted to create an easy fallback sourdough recipe that I could make when I'm in a rush, but I really need sourdough bread. So like many of you know, my husband and I are gluten sensitive. We cannot just go out and buy a loaf of sourdough bread at the store or wheat bread. I have to make this sourdough starter. It helps us so much because in that fermentation process of making a sourdough starter or making homemade sourdough bread, the gluten is so much more tolerable for our gut health because it breaks down. About 90% of that gluten breaks down. So for that reason, I will continue to always make homemade sourdough bread. But I needed that fallback easy recipe. So that is what I have created. You simply mix the ingredients the night before. The next morning, you do a final shaping. You get it in the oven and you're done. It's delicious. You're gonna love it. It might not be as poofy and fluffy as our traditional sourdough bread, but it's delicious. And no one's complaining in my house, so it's what I'm going to keep doing. Let me show you how easy it is to make. The night before, you want to take your active sourdough starter and measure out 300 grams. Use a kitchen scale. It makes the process so much better because you are going to be accurate every single time. Zero out your food scale and it's time to add the water. We're adding 600 grams of lukewarm filtered water. Sometimes I accidentally add too much water to my bowl, so I just use a spoon and take some out until I get 600 grams precisely. Next, we're going to zero out our food scale again, and we're going to add flour. I like to use an unbleached flour, and we're going to add 1,000 grams. To the bowl, we're now going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. Any salt will work. I just happen to have this Himalayan salt from Costco. And then finally, we're going to make sure we zero out the food scale one more time and add honey. You can add between 80 and 160 grams of honey to your bowl. Now it's time to mix the ingredients together in the bowl. You're not going to be able to mix them together totally, but mix it together as best you can before we dump out the dough onto a clean surface. Before dumping out the dough onto that clean surface, make sure you flour it first. The dough is going to be very sticky, and then I do like to flour the top before I start working it in. Now, as you can see, I'm just taking my hands and kind of folding the dough on top of itself to start kneading it and incorporating that flour into the dough. Your hands are going to be very sticky. This is a very sticky dough. So keep the surface well floured and your hands well floured as well, and continue to knead it on top of itself until the dough becomes a dough ball. This whole process only takes about 3 to 5 minutes. This is a very quick and easy dough to put together. As long as the dough is sticky, you want to keep flouring it so that you can work that flour in and the dough will not be sticky anymore. Now that we have formed the dough into a ball, we're going to place it back in its original mixing bowl and add 2 layers of cling wrap, one going vertically and one going horizontally. This will sit on the counter overnight, and tomorrow we will make bread. Good morning, friends. Look how much our dough rose. Isn't that amazing? Okay, so I just take the top layer of cling wrap off the bowl and I save it. I'll show you why here in a minute. The other piece, we're just gonna have to throw it away because it gets so stuck onto the dough. And sometimes I use my bench scraper to help me get it off. Now we're going to lightly flour our work surface and we're going to take off our jewelry. Trust me, friends, you want to do that. Take your bench scraper and scrape the dough onto your work surface. Lightly flour the top of the dough. This just makes it easier when you're using your bench scraper because we're actually going to cut this in half. This next step is not necessary, though I really recommend you do it, is I like to see how much each half of dough weighs because I want them to be exactly equal so that I can have the same size loaves of bread. As you can see, I am shooting for about 1,000 grams per loaf. It's time to do our pre-shaping. Basically, we go from opposite directions and we fold each end into itself in the center. This creates a beautiful rounded loaf and it creates all this texture inside the loaf. So we're going to do that for both loaves of bread and then we're going to let them rest. If we skipped this step of resting, then there will be so much tension in the wheat that we can't use it. It's just not pliable enough for us to make into our loaves. So resting is very important when we're working with sourdough bread. Use that top layer of cling wrap just to put over the tops of the loaves. You don't have to try and seal the edges, and then just lay a clean towel over the top. Set the timer for 20 minutes and let it work its magic. We can now do the final shaping and get these loaves of bread into our loaf pans. So I like to, of course, lightly flour my surface, take my bench scraper and the loaf of bread, and flip it upside down. We're going to take the top end of our dough and fold it down about 1/4 of the way. Then we're going to start braiding the dough. Pinch one side of the dough, pull it to the center, then pinch from the opposite end and pull that to the center until you've worked your way all the way down. Then from the bottom end, roll the dough all the way up to the top and place in your loaf pan. I like to use these silicone loaf pans that I purchased on Amazon, but you can also use a metal pan. I would just put some parchment paper or oil the pan first. Now we're going to use that same piece of cling wrap, cover the top with a towel, and let this rest for 1 hour. Use a metal baking dish and fill it 3/4 of the way with water and put it on the bottom rack of your oven. Now you can preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Bake in the oven for 10 minutes, then lower the heat to 375 and bake for an additional 30 minutes, and the bread will be done. Let it rest on the counter for about 10 minutes before removing it from the loaf pans. Once the loaves of bread have cooled, I like to use an electric knife to slice the bread. Of course you can use a normal bread knife, but an electric knife can make really thin slices, perfect for sandwich bread. And check that out, there's absolutely no big gaping holes in the bread. This is a keeper. Friends, I want to kind of give you my routine of making this super easy sourdough bread. So what I've been doing is on Sunday mornings, I will feed my starter. Sunday night, I will make my dough and get my dough ready to go for this super easy sourdough bread. On Monday morning, I will bake the bread. That'll get us by for a couple of days, 2 loaves. I will repeat the process on Wednesday. So Wednesday morning, I feed my starter. On Wednesday night, I make my dough. On Thursday morning, I bake my bread. And that gets us by through the week. That is enough sandwich bread for my husband and my kids and myself. Now, if I want to make like the cinnamon swirl raisin bread, then I will maybe do 4 loaves on Sunday night. And then I can do my cinnamon swirl bread. Or I might do my pizza roll. I showed you guys that in a previous video here recently on how to make the pizza roll or the cheesy roll up. And so that is what I do. It's the same basic recipe. You can even use this recipe for cinnamon rolls. I will be sharing that with you as we get closer to the fall season. This is by far the easiest sourdough bread, and the recipe is so versatile in making other things. So keep that in mind. And that I just wanted to give you my schedule of how I am baking the sourdough bread throughout the week. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Also, please give this video a big thumbs up. I love making YouTube videos all about handcrafted recipes using fresh ingredients in everyday living. And don't forget, this girl is on a budget. Enjoy your sourdough bread, friends. I'll see you in the next video.